What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another episode. Welcome back to the beer barn on a different boat than you guys are used to seeing. This is not my new boat. I'm going to get a lot of questions about that. The new boat will be ready, I think, around March time frame. So you guys will be seeing it as soon as I can get my hands on it. This is actually Dad's boat. He is nice enough to let me borrow it while I am in between boats. And so that is the boat that I'm in right now. So not the new boat, but we are going to have the new boat showing up very, very soon. But today we're not here to talk about the new boat. We're here to talk about 3 baits that I always have tied on this time of year. These are 3 baits that I'm going to have in the boat with me, in the kayak with me. If I go bank fishing, I'm going to have them with me. These are the 3 baits that I have a ton of confidence in to go out and catch fish this time of year. And now what's really funny and what kind of made me think to do this video is this year is very different than a lot of years past. You know, we are having some really turbulent weather, a lot of extreme weather changes. I mean, week in, week out for the past like month and a half, it's been ice storm 50 degrees, ice storm 50 degrees, ice storm 50 degrees. And those just extreme weather changes like that can make it really hard to go out and catch a fish. And so I got to thinking, you know, how have I adjusted this year to adjust to these extreme weather changes that we've been having? And these 3 baits are the 3 that I've just always made sure I had in the boat with me, and they're 3 baits that I've caught some fish on this year already, going into this late winter time frame that we're going into, this extreme cold weather, extreme cold water really that we've been dealing with. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about those baits, the rods and reels that I throw them on, and some different colors, modifications, sizes, those different things that you guys can consider when you're actually going out and going fishing. So without further ado, let's get into this. Let's start talking about these baits. So my number 1 is going to be a flat-sided crankbait. Now, you know, I love to throw crankbaits. I love to throw small body, medium diving crankbaits this time of year. And really the flat side falls into that category of small body, medium diving crankbait. But what makes the flat side so much different than, say, your rounder body styles of crankbaits is the fact that it has those flat sides. A flat-sided crankbait inherently is going to have a lot tighter wiggle. It's going to have a lot more subtle of an action. This Berkeley frit side that I'm throwing here is a silent bait, and it's also got these little suspend dots in the bottom of them that helps this bait to be a very, very slow float bait. And when you start playing with hooks and split ring sizes, a bait that can suspend. And so it's just a lot more subtle action, a lot more subtle approach to fishing a small body crankbait. And it's something, like I said, and kind of referring back to what I said, that this time of year, and especially this year in particular, where we're dealing with a lot of extreme weather, can be something that allows you to keep a crankbait in your hand but still have a kind of more subtle approach to crankbait fishing and get a lot more bites. And you know, this year, and kind of my rule of thumb, and it's different for every person. You know, everybody has an anecdotal experience with fishing that kind of is a culmination. You know, fishing is a culmination of experiences. Well, in my experience, sub 45 degree water is really where a flat-sided crankbait shines. And this year I've been dealing with a lot of sub 45 degree water temperatures. I have seen as cold as 38 already this year, which is insane, but we've had a big influx of cold rain. We've had a big influx of snow, a lot of runoff from snow and ice. And so it's going to cool those lakes down a whole lot. And so that flat side is what I'm picking up, because we are dealing with those sub 45 degree water temperatures, and it's a bait in sub 45 degree water temperatures I think can excel. Now, what's really cool about the frit side in particular is not only is it silent, not only does it have those little suspend dots on the bottom there that help this thing to be a slow float type of bait, but it comes in a lot of different sizes and a lot of different diving depths. And I think that's super important when you're doing and fishing a flat-sided crankbait, because a flat-sided crankbait can be a bait that is applicable from 2 foot of water all the way down to 13, 14 foot of water, and the frit side helps you to hit all those depth ranges. Now, what I have noticed is that on sunny days, you know, those post-front days, those high sky days, not a ton of wind, when you're having to fish just a little bit deeper, that deeper diving one obviously is going to play, but that the crawl patterns play more. I don't know the exact science as to why this works, and sometimes it's the complete opposite to what I'm about to say, but I've noticed for the most part that sunny days a little bit deeper, the crawl patterns work a whole lot more. And I think it's just simply because those fish move a little bit deeper. They stop focusing in on those shad as much, and they start focusing in on crawdads a little bit more when they're a little bit deeper, because that's where those crawdads are living, because the water's a little bit more stable deeper. And so just by mimicking those crawdads and using that little bit deeper diving crankbait to get down there to mimic those crawdads, you're going to get a lot more bites on the crawdad colors. Whereas on those cloudy days, those more pre-front or right in the middle of the front days, that's when I'm picking up those shad patterns, and that's when I'm picking up that little bit shallower diving fritz side to get work done. And just that is what I've noticed. You know, I think a lot of it has to do with, you know, when you're pre-front, those cloudy days, that wind's blowing, it forces those shad up onto the bank. It forces that bait, which forces the predators up onto the bank. It positions those fish a lot more. And so on those cloudy days, those opaque whites really help to pop and stand out and contrast the water, as well as mimicking shad really, really well. Whereas on those sunny days when the fish are a little bit deeper, are focusing in on those crawdads, those bright orange crawdad colors not only do a good job of mimicking crawdads, but they help to contrast the water really, really well as well and get those fish's attention. Because one thing, I've said this before, and I've heard several people talk about it, and I even ran it by the biologist that we've had on the podcast before, is that, you know, this time of year when fish get cold, their eyes don't work as well. And so those really bright contrasting colors, those contrasting colors that help to contrast not only the water, but the bottom that those fish are feeding off of, and, you know, that bottom composition really, really well is going to be what actually gets bit. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that those fish just can't see super well. And so when something bright and loud that contrasts the environment around them gets near them, they're more apt to react to it. Now, another big thing about this fritz side, like I said, and this is kind of that sneaky deal, is that when you start playing with the hook sizes and the split rings, you can get this bait to actually suspend. And, you know, one sneaky thing that I do this time of year is I slow down a whole lot when I'm fishing, but every time I hit any kind of piece of cover or structure that has any kind of substantialness to it, I'm going to stop this bait. And so you got to imagine, you know, this crankbait's coming through the water, and when it hits something, it's going to deflect off. And when it deflects off, I just stop reeling, and that thing's going to plane out, and it's just going to sit there right in front of this fish's face. You know, and I'm not going to let it sit there for 5-10 seconds at a time, but just long enough to give that thing a pause, let those fish kind of key in on where it's at, and then go and get it. You know, and just slowing down, doing that stop and go retrieve, and stopping that bait every single time you hit some kind of piece of cover or structure can be the difference between getting bites and not getting bites. And I think that is huge, especially with this fritz side, you know, playing with the hook size and the split ring sizes. I'll show you guys an example right here. This is a fritz side that I've got just a little bit bigger split rings on, a little bit bigger hooks on, and what I've noticed is in really cold water, when I bounce that thing off of a tree, or when I bounce that thing off of any kind of rock or anything like that, and I stop it, it's going to stop, it levels out, and it's going to suspend right there, and it's just long enough to give those fish a chance to react to that thing, especially when they're cold. And I think that can, again, make the difference between getting a bite and not. Now, as far as rod, reel, and line I'm throwing this thing on, I'm throwing it on the same rod and reel that I throw all my other small body crankbaits on. It's a 7-foot medium moderate fast action Abu Garcia winch. I got that paired up with an ALF. This ALF's cool. It's a little bit smaller spool. It's a little bit smaller reel. It does a really good job of handling that lighter line a lot better. And then the lighter line that I'm throwing on there is anywhere from 10 to 12 pound test fluorocarbon. And the reason we go that little bit lighter line is it allows that bait to get to the maximum diving depth that it needs to. And when you're trying to get down there deep, you know, with this particular crankbait, you know, you want to allow that bait to have the most action that it can and get to deep as it possibly can, and that lighter line allows you to do that. Now, number 2 is going to be the jerkbait. The jerkbait, for a lot of the same reasons that I like that fritz side. It suspends. It's something that I can slow down with. It's something that can get those fish to react. And really, a jerkbait this time of year is a tool for catching big fish. You know, I've noticed that my bigger than average bite comes on the jerkbait. So say I'm in a tournament situation, like in a kayak tournament, I can go get a limit really quick with my fritz side, go back through with the jerkbait and get a really big bite, and then if I get really desperate, pick up the last bait that we're going to talk about. But that jerk bait is one of those baits, a lot like that frit side. You can get it to suspend, you can fish it really, really slow, and again, in sub 45-degree water temperatures, can just be a killer. Now, the one I've got tied on here, this is that Stunner 112. It's a brand new bait for this year. And what's cool about this one is it is a slow sinking jerk bait. And so that slow sink, I've noticed, again, sub 45-degree water temperatures can be huge. And this is something, I guess it looks like a dying bait fish. You know, if you notice or look at bait fish when you're having a shad kill or something like that, they'll kind of twitch around and they'll just kind of start shimmying down, sinking and dying. And this jerk bait's going to do the same thing. And so I think that being the case, you know, you get those fish to react, you get those fish to eat this thing because it does look like a dying bait fish. Now, the jerk bait for me is going to be one of those baits that I don't pick up unless the wind's blowing. You know, unless I am got a lot of chop on the water. I've noticed that the jerk bait just isn't as effective in those situations where you don't have wind, where you don't have current, where you don't have chop on top of the water. So the jerk bait is definitely going to be a bait for me that's kind of that pre-front or right in the middle of the front type of bait that I'm going to pick up and I'm going to fish. Now, one thing about the jerk bait is the colors. Now, colors I think are super important in the jerk bait. I have fished a jerk bait enough to know that color can really make the difference between putting fish in the boat and not. You know, and I think a lot of situations, the wrong color in the right place will catch them every single time. But I think with a jerk bait, if you really want to kind of take it up a notch, you know, picking the right color is huge when you're fishing the jerk bait. So for me, my rule of thumb is on super sunny days, those days when it is bluebird sky, but you still have that wind, I'm going to go with either a translucent color like you got here. This is called Northern Lights. I mean, you guys can see straight through that thing. This is just a translucent with like a translucent purple back, a little bit of a translucent chartreuse pop on the bottom, and or a chrome base, something that's going to throw a lot of light. So you either want something that the light is going to penetrate straight through, or you want something that's going to actually reflect back off and throw that light off of that thing in those sunny days. Whereas if I'm dealing with those cloudy days, those overcast days, I'm going to want something with some opaque kind of hues or opaque kind of base to it. This right here is Ozark Shad, I believe is what it's called, and you guys can see you get that opaque side on that thing, that hint of chartreuse. You roll over, you got a little bit of chartreuse on the belly, and then you've got that dark purple back. And what that does is, instead of letting the light penetrate straight through it or throw the light off of it, it kind of almost glows in the water. And so on those really cloudy days when you don't have a ton of light to actually throw off of a bait or penetrate through a bait, you want something that's going to pop out and contrast that water really, really well. And that's where those more opaque colors are going to come into play. And I'll tell you another thing is, you know, as we move later on into the winter and early into the spring, a lot of people get really wary of throwing a jerk bait in dirty water. Jerk baits work in dirty water. I don't know why people don't think that they do, but in my experiences, they do. I mean, I took a jerkbait out to Oklahoma with Edwin, and it was so funny because he was like, "You're going to throw a jerkbait?" And I'm like, "I am," and picked it up and caught a fish on it. And you got to think, when you look at a jerkbait, it is a very violent bait. You're jerking this thing around, you know, you're really hitting it hard. It's got a bunch of rattles. It's got a bunch of noise in it. It's darting through the water really, really hard, displacing a lot of water. And so in that little bit dirtier water, I'm not saying throw it in chocolate milk, but in just a little bit of dirty water, throwing these opaque colors, even on the sunny days in that little bit dirtier water, is going to help to make it pop, to contrast. And when you're jerking that thing around and it's making as much noise as a jerk bait can make, you can get fish to react to that thing. Now, as far as rod, reel, line, I am very particular about my jerkbait rod. This is a 610 medium, moderate, fast winch. This is the jerkbait rod in the winch family, and I love this thing. I was worried, I'll be honest with you, that I wouldn't be able to find a jerkbait rod that I like, but this one was the first one that was sent to me and I fell in love with it. It's a very crisp rod. It's got a very crisp response. It loads really, really well. So not only does it have that little bit faster tip that you need to really hit those jerkbaits hard when you need to, or just make those little subtle twitches when you need to, but it's going to load really well, have a good parabolic bend, and help you to get those treble hooks stuck into that fish and not rip them out. So that's that 610 medium, moderate, fast action jerkbait rod. I got that paired up with a 7 gear ratio reel. This is a Zeta any 7-gear ratio reel will do. And you kind of almost want a little bit shallower or smaller spool on your jerkbait rod for the same reasons that we have it on our crankbait rod, because you're going to be using lighter line, and so that little bit shallower spool is going to help you to cast that lighter line a little bit better. And then for line, I'm fishing 10-pound fluorocarbon just to help that thing to get to its maximum diving depth and to help suspend where it's at. That fluorocarbon being sinking line is going to help that bait to suspend and, or as in this jerkbait's case, sink really slowly. And so that's just what you need to use on there to really get the maximum performance out of that jerkbait. But a jerkbait, man, I'm telling you, you guys have seen it year in, year out. It's always one of those deals. You don't get a ton of bites on it, but the bites that you're going to get on it are going to be those big key bites. I mean, last year during this time, we had some pretty extreme cold weather. Nothing like we're having this year, but there was a few key instances where I picked up the jerkbait and locked it in my hand down some key stretches and put some big fish, or had the chance to put some big fish into the boat that would have made the difference, and did make the difference throughout the day. Now the last one is going to be the Dad Jim Deadly Nedley, son. The Deadly Nedley. I love the Ned Rig. I love it and I hate it all at the same time. Now, I really do love the Ned Rig. This has become such a confidence lure for me, and I say it all the time in my videos. It can save the day when nothing else will. And so the Ned Rig is going to be a big player. You know, and a Ned Rig is going to be one of those baits that I pick up when you are post front, high bluebird skies, when those fish have just stopped eating any kind of reaction bait and they've moved off deep. The Ned Rig is what I'm going to pick up. And you know, one of my favorite baits this year, and one that I'm growing to love more and more, is this little dude. This is that little Berkeley Max Scent little trooper. And this is such a small and subtle bait. When I first saw it, I thought, man, that thing is too small. It's not going to do what I want it to do, because you guys know I kind of figured out a way to fish the Ned Rig for me, which is a lot more violent, you know, really hopping that bait hard, using really drastic covers, using those heavier heads. And so when I saw this bait, I didn't think it would really play into that style, which it does in that case, but it also plays that dragging, really slow kind of traditional Ned Rig style really well too. And it's just a cool little bait. You know, it's a lot thinner on the sides. It's a lot smaller in length. It just doesn't have as much bulk as those other baits do. And fishing on this little EWG head here, this little hand poured head, you can have a good wide gap on that hook. It really compresses well, allows you to get a good hook into those fish. But it just does such a good job of mimicking those crawdads, those little bitty smaller crawdads that I think a lot of those bass key in on. You know, I've caught fish 6-pounders that spit up crawdads as big as my Dad Jim hand, but I also have caught 6-pounders that spit up crawdads about that size right there. And I think more often times than not, bass are keying in on that little bit smaller crawdad because it's a heck of a lot easier to eat than that big one. You know, those big crawdads, they're going to put up a fight. It's like eating a chicken wing with extra hot sauce on it. You know, you're going to be able to get it down and you're going to eat it, but it's going to be spicy on the way down. Whereas those little bitty crawdads are like a chicken wing with some mild sauce on it. It may be a little spicy on the way down, but you're going to be able to get it down a lot better. Now, as far as colors and all that stuff, you know, crawl patterns. I mean, you guys can see here, this is a little orange crawl pattern, got that green back, that orange on there. I also just love more natural crawl patterns, especially when I'm fishing a lot cleaner water, you know, something, a brown base or a green base. I don't know what the deal is. Some lakes around here are green base lakes, some lakes around here are brown base lakes. And I have both just so that I can have both and use both on the different scenarios where I find myself. But yeah, any of those kind of natural crawl patterns are going to work. And one thing I've noticed is that using a little bit of dip and dye, a little bit of, like, this is JJ's Magic is what this is, but some dip and dye to dye those claws orange, just give that bait just a little bit of pop, can make all the difference, especially when I'm fishing it just a little bit harder than people traditionally fish a Ned Rig. You know, I said earlier, and I made a video about this, that I am the kind of guy that fishes that Ned Rig in a little bit different fashion than most people. And so I like to put just a little bit of orange or have some flash of orange in there, some methylate on there to really give that bait some pop and stand out in the water so that I can fish that thing just a little bit harder than the normal person does. And it kind of almost think sometimes makes those fish react to it. Also with this bait, it's going to stand up. Those little claws are going to get in a defensive position. And I think if you got a little bit of methylate on there, those claws start moving and moving around like that. just hits a little instinct in those fish's head. It's just a little something extra to make them eat. And then obviously this little trooper is that max scent technology, which I did not believe in this. I did not. I didn't believe in this, but a couple years ago, I won a kayak tournament, almost won $1,000 in a kayak tournament throwing max scent, and then I started working with Berkeley, obviously, and got a lot of max scent stuff, and this crap straight up works. Scent technology and scent in bass is something that has become very fascinating to me, especially after I had a conversation with the biologist where he said that he believes that a bass's sense of smell is one of its most important, if it's not most important, senses that it has, because bass, they've starting to study them and they're starting to find out that bass can actually identify the caloric value of different types of things that it eats based on its smell. And so whatever they've put into max scent must hit that instinct really well, because it really makes them eat it. Now, as far as the Ned heads I'm throwing it on, you guys can see I'm throwing a little EWG hand pour head. This is a 3/16 ounce head. That EWG style hook allows me to hide that hook point, allows me to fish it in rocks, around cover, around boat docks a lot more, not hang up as many, not lose as many hooks. I'm usually an exposed hook guy, but I've started experimenting with that EWG head more and more. And I've just noticed I'm a lot more effective with the EWG style head. So EWG style hook, 3/16 ounce head, 10-pound fluorocarbon leader, 20-pound mainline braid, 300 size reel on a 7-foot medium fast action spinning rod, just a general purpose spinning rod. And that right there has been a confidence bait for me. It continues to be a confidence bait for me, and it's something that I hate to say that I like it, but I do. It has saved me many a days out there on the lake, and it has got me very close in a couple kayak tournaments this year already to winning. And hopefully this kayak tournament I got coming up this weekend, hopefully I do really well in it and kind of keep working towards my Angler of the Year goal. We've not talked about it since my last tournament, but we're back around to the next tournament. This is another tournament towards Angler of the Year goal, so yeah. But guys, as always, thank you for watching. If you want to check out more tips, tricks, some cranking videos, some Ned Rig fishing videos, I'm gonna have 2 videos popping up on the screen right now. You guys can click either one of those to go check out some more content around this type of fishing and actually get to see some on the water type of stuff. But as always, you guys are sweet, and thank you for watching.